Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kyle Kugler, and I am the Iowa Sourcing Program Coordinator at the University of Northern Iowa's John Papajohn Entrepreneurial Center. Today, we will be discussing the basics of sales and use tax in Iowa. So presenting today is Terry O'Neill. Terry is a taxpayer services specialist at the Iowa Department of Revenue, and working in the background to help answer some questions is Chet Eigenor. As he is an information technology specialist at IDR as well, so he should be able to assist with those questions. So thank you both to Terry and Chet for taking some time to share this information with everyone. Also working in the background from my team is Sophie Troxel and Haley Ham, just to make sure that everything doesn't crash and burn. So a special thank you to them for helping out. So before we get started, let's just go over a few housekeeping items. Just today's webinar is being recorded and will be available at a later date. This typically means within a day or two, so just be kind of patient, but we will get it out to you. The link for the recording will be found on our YouTube channel. So just be searching around for that. We can also put that in the chat box for you to see. The slides that you see today will also be available for download. So he's going to be putting that in the chat momentarily. If you have any questions at any given time today, make sure to put it in the Q&A box that's located at the bottom half of your screen. We're actually going to hold off on answering questions live until the very end of the presentation. This is just to make sure that we get through all of the content before we actually take time to answer those questions. If there is not enough time to answer all of the questions today, don't worry. All of them are going to be sent to Terry and Chet, just to make sure, alongside your contact information, just to make sure that your questions are heard. And lastly, just because of all the weather that's happening today, if the webinar freezes or we lose connection momentarily, just stay calm. We're working as best as we can to get everybody back up live. So with that, Terry, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kyle. And thanks for all of our friends at Iowa SourceLink for assisting with this presentation today. Welcome, everybody. I see we have a good number of people here. It's great to have you here today. We'll go ahead and get started here. This is Iowa Sales and Use Tax Basics. And as Kyle said, I am Terry O'Neill, longtime taxpayer service specialist with the Iowa Department of Revenue. So let's just go ahead and jump in here and we will get started. Before we go any further, we always have to give our slide here from our legal department. If you've ever been to one of our webinars before, you'll know that this is something that we do at all of our webinars. Just want to remind everyone that the purpose of this presentation is for general educational purposes only. It is not to be construed as legal advice in any way. And anything that is said here today is not binding on the department. Okay, the only thing that is binding on the department is if you have a petition for a declaratory order from the director of the Department of Revenue. So please keep that in mind. Some things that we're going to cover today with Iowa sales and use taxes. We are going to cover the tax rate. We're going to cover some information on Iowa sales tax, Iowa local option sales tax, information on use tax, Nexus, permit requirements for Iowa purposes, return filing and tax payments, and we're going to give you some reminders of some basic information on about the Iowa Department of Revenue and sales and use tax as well. So with that being said, we're just going to go ahead and move forward. Starting out with sales tax. A couple of things here that's just some basic information to start out with. Sales tax must be collected when a sale is sourced to Iowa. And what are we talking about when we say sourced to Iowa? We're saying that if a purchaser first possesses the product in Iowa, that's going to be sourced to Iowa. What I'm saying here is if you were to purchase some tangible personal property that's taxable and you take delivery here or you take possession here in Iowa, that's going to be sourced to Iowa. So if a product is delivered to Iowa or if a taxable service is first used in Iowa. I'll touch on some things related to taxable services here in a little bit. But again, when it comes to services, first use is going to determine if the sale is sourced to Iowa or not. Something else that we always mention in this class too, and I just want to do this from the standpoint of just making everybody aware, hopefully we're all on the same page. Sales tax is paid by the final consumer, okay? It's collected by the retailer, and then it's remitted to the state by the retailer. So what I'm trying to say to you is, if I was to go into a store and I was to purchase tangible personal property, such as my pen right here. If I was to go into a place that sold pens, I bought this. When I walked up to the cash register, I paid for the pen. I will pay the sales tax at that time. I will pay it to the retailer. The retail store then will collect that tax and they will remit it onto the department. The reason I bring this up is just to make sure if there's ever a question about a refund, okay, the one that paid the tax is the one that could potentially be entitled to a refund if there was an exemption in place at the time and the person paid tax on it when they should not have. And the reason I bring this up is it's very common that I get questions from retailers and they will say something like, oh, hey, I accidentally charged tax to the state of Iowa. They've made a purchase from me and the state of Iowa paid for it. It should have been tax exempt. How do I get my money back? Well, the answer is you as the retailer, you don't get the money back, okay? The person that paid the tax, the final consumer, is the one that's entitled to a refund if there's a refund due. So again, just a short, quick example. I just wanted to clarify that so everybody has an understanding. What is taxable in Iowa when it comes to sales and use taxes? Well, taxable is all tangible personal property. Again, I was waving my pen around at you before. This is an example of tangible personal property. This is going to be something that's taxable. Specified digital products. Specified digital products, what's an example of that? Well, potentially if you purchase some music online and you download that, or maybe you purchase an ebook online, you download that. That's an example of potentially a specified digital product. Also, enumerated services. And what in the world does that mean when I'm saying enumerated services? Well, basically in Iowa, all services are tax exempt unless specifically enumerated as taxable in the Iowa code. So enumerated services is just basically another fancy term that means taxable service. If you want more information on this, check out our website. I'll give you the web address here after a while, but you can type in information. You can put in specified digital products. We've got information on that topic. Also, if you put in taxable services, we've got a publication for that as well. Speaking of taxable services, some common taxable services are listed here on the screen. A few that I just want to touch base on. Cosmetology services are taxable. Electrical repair and installation services are taxable. Janitorial, lawn care, landscaping services. Those are all examples of services that are taxable in Iowa. Those are enumerated services, which means they are specified in the Iowa code as being taxable. Okay, if you need more information on services, check out our website, type in taxable services. We've got a publication for that. Exemptions for taxes include, and this is not all of them by any means, I'm just giving you some examples of some common ones. The first thing we have listed there, the first exception or exemption to services is services performed on or connected with new construction, reconstruction, alteration, expansion, or remodeling of a building or a structure. So what am I saying here? Well, if you look up there a little higher, I said electrical installation is a taxable service. It is, it's one of our enumerated services. However, if I was hiring an electrician to come and build a new building for me, let's say I was going to build a new house, okay, and the contractor, the electrician is going to come and do the wiring. Since that service is performed on or connected with new construction, that service is going to be exempt from tax, okay? That's what I'm trying to say here on this first exception or exemption to the tax on services. Another exception here, services performed for an employer. Now, here's an example. Again, don't take me literally on this, but I think it serves to get the point across. I am a longtime employee here at the Iowa Department of Revenue, okay? If the director would come to me one day and say, Terry, the lawn's starting to look kind of shabby outside the Hoover State Office building here in Des Moines. Can you go out and mow the lawn? Well, lawn care is a taxable service. So, but however, since I would be performing that service for my employer, I would not charge sales tax in that situation. Okay. Hopefully that's a pretty far-fetched example. I don't think the director is going to come to me to do lawn care service outside the Hoover building, but I just wanted to put an example out there for you so you knew what I was talking about. Another example of an exemption is items purchased for resale. Again, I'm going to use my pen for an example because that's what I've got handy here. If I sell office supplies, I sell pens and pencils and staplers and all that good stuff. If I want to purchase any of my inventory, I can do so tax exempt for resale because I'm going to purchase this thing. I'm going to turn around and sell it to my customers. And assuming the customer is not tax exempt for some reason, I'm going to charge them tax. So hopefully, again, that makes sense to you. The resale exemption does apply. Local option sales tax. Any retailers, and this could include a remote seller or a marketplace facilitator that's required to have an Iowa sales tax permit, they must collect tax on taxable sales, the state sales tax, and any applicable local option sales tax as well. What is the local option sales tax, or LOST, L-O-S-T? It's an additional 1% sales tax that can be imposed by Iowa counties and cities. Essentially, this applies when taxable sales are sourced to a jurisdiction imposing the tax. So, for example, I am from Scott County. And in Scott County, we have a 1% local option sales tax that's countywide. So if someone makes a taxable purchase in Scott County, and they are taking delivery of the product in Scott County, that is going to be subject to state sales tax of 6% plus 1% tax, local option sales tax. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Local option sales tax does not require a special permit in order to be able to collect that and remit it to the department. Okay, if you have a sales tax permit, you are already registered with the department to collect and remit local option sales tax. Local option sales tax essentially applies to the same sales that are subject to sales tax. There's one exception I can think of just offhand, and that's your home heating for your utility bills at home, like when you get your gas and electric bill. That's not subject to state sales tax. However, it is still subject to the local option sales tax. So that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head where you might be paying 1% tax on a transaction that is taxable. Use tax. When it comes to use tax, there is a use tax is a 6% tax that's imposed on the use of tangible personal property, specified digital products, and services in Iowa. Generally, use tax could apply in two situations. The first situation is when a retailer should have collected sales tax but did not. In that case, the purchaser would owe the use tax on it. Certain transactions are exempt from sales tax, but they're subject to use tax. That's just because that's what the Iowa law says. An example, if you were purchasing an aircraft, an airplane is only subject to use tax. It is not subject to sales tax. Almost all sales tax exemptions apply to use tax as well. So it's very similar to the state use tax. The use tax may be collected by the retailer and remitted to the state. It could also be remitted to the state directly by the purchaser. So let me give you an example here. I said a little bit earlier towards the top of the slide that it's a 6% tax on the use of a product in Iowa. The classic example was always, before the Wayfair case especially, if someone made a purchase online. Let's say you went shopping online, you went and you purchased an article of tangible personal property. It was delivered in here to you in Iowa for use in Iowa. If you did not pay Iowa tax on that purchase, it was your responsibility to come to the department and pay us the use tax, okay? That still is in effect today. However, since we did have the Wayfair case a few years ago, a lot more online retailers are collecting and remitting the applicable tax. So maybe you don't run across this as often as you did before, but that's an example of when you would owe use tax. If you're purchasing something, again, for use in Iowa, and the retailer did not charge you tax. Just an example for you. Paying use tax. When it comes to paying use tax, if you are making taxable purchases on a regular basis, you should apply for a sales and use tax permit and report the tax on the taxable purchases section of the Iowa return. Okay. A lot of times this would apply to businesses. Businesses constantly are purchasing things for their daily operations of the business. So that would be an example of making purchases on a regular basis. This could also apply to individuals as well. But if you are an individual and you're making taxable purchases on occasion, but the retailer fails to collect the sales tax, so then it falls on you, you can fill out a non-permit use tax return. This is a fillable form that you can report the use tax on taxable purchases, and you can send a check to the department. That's something that that is available to you. As I said, if you do this on a regular basis, if you constantly make purchases where you might owe use tax, you should register with the department. For those situations where it's just a once in a while type of thing, you can fill out the form and you can send it to us that way. Tax rates. A couple of things here. I just want to touch base on the tax rate to make sure everyone is online with it. The state sales tax rate is 6%. Okay, 6%. There is also in many areas of the department, or excuse me, in many areas of the state of Iowa, there is a 1% local option sales tax. And you might be scratching your head saying, well, how in the world do I know if it's 6% or if it's 7%? Well, we do have a tax mapper application on our website. If you were to click on that, you can type in the exact address of where you're sending something or where you're located at, and it will give you the tax rate. It will tell you if it is 6% or 7% as far as Iowa sales tax is concerned. So take a look at that. It's something that works out really well. I know many times when taxpayers, when businesses, when people contact me and they'll say, Terry, what's the sales tax rate in somewhere Iowa? Well, unless it's an area that I'm familiar with, I will have to look up. I use the tax mapper as well. So do our other phone staff. We type in the information and then we can tell easily. This is something that you can do as well. It's nothing top secret that's only for Department of Revenue personnel. It's for the public. So check it out. It's on our website. It's a handy tool if you're not sure what the tax rate is in a certain location in Iowa. The use tax rate, as I said, is also 6%. One thing to keep in mind is that there is no local option use tax. Okay, there is only local option sales tax. So the extra 1% can only apply to transactions that are subject to sales tax. They do not apply to transactions that are subject to use tax. That's something that we do get questions on a regular basis. A couple things to keep in mind when it comes to Iowa sales and use tax. Tax cannot be absorbed or paid by the retailer. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying is if you are selling something that's taxable to a taxable customer, you need to add a line on that says sales tax down at the bottom of your invoice, or if you wish, you can have tax included in the price as long as it says so. So for example, common businesses that have tax included in the price. The one that I can always, the classic example is always a bar. After you listen to Terry talk about sales tax here for an hour, you might need to stop off and have a drink before you go back to work. If you do that, a lot of times bars, taverns, they will sell their drinks with tax included in the price. So that way they don't have to count out a lot of change or anything like that. They just sell drinks for even dollar amounts many times. As long as they've got a sign hanging up or something that says this price includes tax, they are going to be A-OK with the Department of Revenue. Another common example too is if you ever go to the theater, if you ever go to the movies, many times those have tax included in the price as well. The tickets for admission are subject to sales tax. And as a convenience, a lot of times they will just charge a price with tax included in the price. It makes it less of a burden when they're trying to count out change and things on a busy weekend when there's a lot of people that are going to see a movie. So those are just a couple of examples for you. Again, as long as it's posted, if it's on the invoice, if it's posted on the wall for the public to see, as long as it says taxes included in the price, you are A-OK to do that. Going to talk a little bit about Nexus. And what in the world is Nexus? Well, Nexus is a fancy term that basically means a presence in Iowa. Nexus means a presence in Iowa. You are required to charge and collect sales tax if you have Nexus in Iowa. There's two types of Nexus, okay? Two types of Nexus. There is a physical Nexus and there is an economic Nexus. And if you've been in the sales tax business for a while, you might recall that we used to only have physical Nexus. And physical Nexus, pretty straightforward. I don't want to minimize it because there can be complicated situations that come up and maybe it's not so clear. However, some examples of things that create physical Nexus. The first thing, if you are a business and you have an office, maybe a warehouse, or you have other business property in Iowa, that would establish a physical Nexus here in Iowa. If you have a representative located in Iowa, maybe permanently, maybe temporarily, if they are an employee or possibly an independent contractor, that could establish a physical Nexus in the state of Iowa. If you're a construction contractor, maybe you're performing a construction contract in Iowa, you're physically here with your employees, that would establish a physical Nexus. If you're installing products in Iowa, that would establish a physical Nexus. So basically, again, what I'm trying to say is if you physically come here to Iowa, that would give you a physical Nexus. Again, if you're doing service work in Iowa, that establishes physical Nexus, as does delivery of products into Iowa with your own trucks. Okay, if you're delivering here with your own trucks, physical Nexus. If you lease tangible personal property in Iowa, that could establish physical Nexus as well. So again, those are pretty straightforward. And again, if you've been in the sales tax business for a while, that used to be the only game in town. Physical Nexus was the determining factor as to whether or not you had to have a sales tax permit. We now have, since the Wayfair case of a few years ago, we now have an economic Nexus threshold as well. What creates economic Nexus? Well, economic Nexus is going to apply to remote sellers, and the remote sellers are sellers that do not have a physical Nexus in Iowa. If they have $100,000 or more of gross revenue from sales into Iowa, that's going to establish economic Nexus. So again, they're going to need an Iowa sales tax permit if they are making taxable sales in Iowa and they have $100,000 or more in gross revenue. Okay, this is going to establish economic Nexus. Marketplace facilitators, if they make or facilitate $100,000 or more in gross revenue from Iowa, that's also going to create an economic Nexus in Iowa as well. The gross revenue is going to include exempt sales, wholesale sales, sales for resale, sales made through marketplaces. It's the gross revenue. It's everything. That's all involved when determining if someone meets the $100,000 threshold or not. Permit requirements. Okay. Any business that has Nexus, either physical Nexus or economic Nexus, they must register for a sales and use tax permit and collect Iowa sales and any applicable local option sales tax as well. Remember, I said if you are required to have a sales tax permit, you're going to have to collect any applicable local option sales tax as well. It does not apply to use tax, only applies to sales tax transactions. We did have a few changes in July 1st of 2022 as far as Iowa tax permits are concerned. And essentially these changes, hopefully you're aware of them by now. You've received some information from the department, but we'll just review them here briefly for you. New and existing permit holders with the department, they only need one permit in order to handle both sales and use tax, okay? Separate permits, one for sales tax, one for use tax, are not required. Retailers that have multiple Iowa locations still need to have a permit for each location. Okay, that did not change. We've always had it that way as long as I've been around here working with Iowa sales tax. Each permit that makes taxable sales, each location that makes taxable sales must have a sales tax permit for each location. Retailers may use multiple permits if they prefer to do so. They do not have to cancel all their permits and just have one permit. Existing permit holders, taxpayers with one sales tax and one consumer's use tax permit now only have to have one permit. That is their existing sales tax permit. So again, what I'm trying to say is, in the past, retailers, if they were registered for sales tax, they were registered for use tax, they had to have separate permits, okay? That's no longer required. You can just get by with one permit, and that will allow you to remit either sales tax or use tax or both on that one filing, that one return. There's no changes for any other taxpayers unless the taxpayer requests to merge, cancel, or consolidate. So for existing permit holders, we weren't going to make them change, I guess is the best way to say it, unless they request a change, maybe to file a consolidated return. Maybe they wanted to cancel their use tax registration. They could certainly do that. But I just want you to know that you are only required to have one permit to register sales tax and to remit sales tax and remit use tax. Now, again, I'm still not, I don't want to lead you astray thinking that you do not have to have a permit for each location. You still do need a sales tax permit for each location, okay? But what I'm saying is you do not have to have separate permits for sales tax and for use tax if you do not wish to. Use tax permit requirements. Any retailer without a physical presence in Iowa and whose gross revenue from Iowa sales is below the $100,000 threshold are required to collect sales tax. They may collect use tax from their customers and report it as sales subject to use tax on the sales and use tax return. Okay, they're not required to, but they can do so voluntarily. We used to call this retail use tax. So are you tracking with me on that? What I'm trying to say is, if you do not meet the requirements of a physical nexus or an economic nexus, you can still register and you can collect and remit the applicable Iowa tax. Now, why would you do that? I had an example here. It's been some time ago now. There was a business in Colorado, if I remember correctly, and they were asking if they met our economic or nexus or our physical nexus thresholds. And after I discussed with them for a while, we determined that they did not meet the nexus thresholds for physical nexus or economic nexus. So they were not required to have an Iowa sales tax permit. However, the owner of that business was born in Iowa. He was a gentleman that grew up in Iowa, and he wanted to make sure Iowa was getting their tax. So by all means, he can do so. In that case, he would register for a use tax permit. Again, which is again all done on one permit these days, the sales and use tax permit. Sales and use tax law changes from 2019 require many sellers who previously remitted retail use tax to get a sales tax permit instead. Okay, so if you do have a retail use tax permit, we will still take your filings. We will still take your money. Thank you for collecting the tax. That's okay. However, technically, you should have a sales tax permit if you have if you meet the requirements for physical or economic nexus. So something just to keep in mind. Iowa tax permits. Applications for all permits are on the department's website, or they can be completed in the GovConnect Iowa portal. If you've been working with Iowa sales tax for a while, You'll note that we have, we changed things up as far as filing returns, and we do have the GovConnect Iowa portal, which is used for filing your sales and use tax returns. We have other tax types that you can make payments for on there, and we're going to be rolling out R3 or rollout 3 here this fall, and it's going to allow people to make individual income tax payments in that system as well. So you'll hear more about that if you haven't heard a lot already. Iowa tax permits. It's illegal to make taxable sales without a permit. Okay, you've got to get an Iowa sales tax permit if you're making taxable sales and you're collecting and remitting the tax. So keep that in mind. Got to have a permit. Once you do get a sales tax permit from the department, it's going to stay in effect basically forever until either you cancel it, or in rare occasions, the department can and will revoke a sales tax permit from you. Now, why would we do that? Well, if a retailer has problems, if they don't file returns, if they don't remit the tax, if they have a whole lot of issues like that, we can and we will revoke your sales tax permit, which effectively puts you out of business. Now, we just don't wake up in the morning and decide we're going to revoke a sales tax permit, okay? There's quite a process till it gets to that. And so just be aware, it shouldn't hit anybody out in the dark, out in left field. But the department can revoke a sales tax permit. My point is, you do not have to renew your permit, and it stays good. You still have to file returns. Even if you had no taxable sales, you still file returns. As long as your permit's active, you've got to file. Another permit type that I wanted to mention to you, and this is something that's not terribly common. As far as I'm aware, I think there's approximately 30 of them, give or take a handful, but there are direct pay permits. And a direct pay permit is going to allow qualified purchasers, users, and consumers of tangible personal property, specified digital products, or taxable services to remit sales and use tax, including any applicable local option tax as well, directly to the department rather than their suppliers. This is only available to businesses that are sending us a whole lot of money, more than $8,000 per month. And we've got some information on our website for that as well. Now, this is something that the department does screen these applicants to make sure that that's really what they want to do, and make sure that's something that we're going to allow someone to do. If you're a small business and you're not sending us that much money, obviously that's going to disqualify you. But think of some large manufacturing types of businesses in the state of Iowa. That would give you an idea of what we're talking about here. And why do we have such a thing? Well, these large businesses, they buy many, many things in the course of a month. Some things are subject to tax, some things are not. And for these big businesses, they have the accounting departments, they have the resources available. And as a convenience, it's easier sometimes for them to determine if the purchase is taxable or not taxable, instead of the retailer having to try to figure it out. And so we do have that option available. Again, this is not very widespread. I always tell people about this just in case you are a retailer and one of these folks comes to you and says, hey, I'm a direct pay permit, I don't pay sales tax to you. They'll call us and they'll say, what's that? I've never heard of it before. What documentation is needed? A sales tax exemption certificate is needed. And on that exemption certificate, there is a place to write in their direct pay permit. So that's just a little bit of information on direct pay permits. Please check out our website. There's some more information on there if that's something you deal with. But this is for most people, it's probably more of an FYI than anything. And I just want you to be aware of it. Filing information. Since we had some changes to sales tax, there's two main options for filing your sales tax returns with the department. You can file on a monthly basis, which is for taxpayers collecting $1,200 or more in sales or use tax per calendar year. If you are a monthly filer, you've got to file returns electronically. You've also got to pay electronically. This is done in that GovConnect Iowa portal that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Monthly filers, your tax is always due on the last day of the month following the month in which the tax was collected or accrued. So, as an example here, we are now in the month of July. Okay, July tax is due by the end of August. Okay, if you are a monthly filer, July tax is going to be due by the end of August. Reminder as well, if the due date ever comes on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday, it's actually going to be due on the next business day. So the next official day of business is when it's actually going to be due. There are also another status besides monthly. There is an annual status. And annual filers are those that are collecting, remitting less than $1,200. Okay, less than $1,200, you can be an annual filer. Annual filers can file in GovConnect Iowa. They can also file and pay by paper as well. So annual filers can do either. Monthly filers have to file they have to file electronically and pay electronically through GovConnect Iowa. There's another option as well. We do have an option out there for seasonal filers. Maybe this could be for businesses that make sales in 4 or less months per year, but they are over the annual filing threshold. What's an example of one of these? Perhaps you have someone that's a vendor at fairs during the summertime in Iowa. Maybe they travel around to various county fairs, the state fair and such, and they make sales throughout the state of Iowa. That's only going to be done during the summertime. So they have 4 months or less, but yet they're collecting over $1,200 a year. They can become a seasonal filer with the department. So I just want you to be aware that that option is out there as well. Still talking about return filing frequencies. When do people have to file with us? Well, if you are asking about an excise tax, and what's an excise tax? Hotel motel tax is an excise tax. Automobile rental tax is an excise tax. And so too are those that sell certain types of construction equipment. Those are excise taxes, and most of those, they got to be remitted on a monthly basis. Doesn't matter the dollar amount, they have to file and remit the tax on a monthly basis. If anybody's familiar with the water service excise tax, which we call WET, the water service excise tax, this is its own tax permit, its own type of return, and you can be either monthly or annual for that. Again, we use that $1,200 threshold. If that's the amount of tax that's being collected, we look at, are you above the $1,200 threshold? Then you should be filing on a monthly basis. If you're below, you should be filing on an annual basis. Again, this is based on the total WET, sales and use tax collected per year. That's going to determine your threshold for your filing frequency. Tax payment frequencies. Again, I mentioned this a little bit ago. The sales and use tax is to be paid when the return is due. Okay. So again, July tax, if you're a monthly filer, is due by the end of August. So that's when the tax actually has to be paid. Please note on here, there's no longer monthly deposits or semi-monthly deposits. There's also no longer quarterly returns. Okay. If you are a monthly filer, you will file a return each month. You will report your sales, you'll report your exemptions, you'll report your local option tax. All of that stuff is done on a monthly basis. No longer are there quarterly returns where you report the entire quarter worth of sales. So please keep that in mind. I think we're getting people are getting on board with this. When the changeover happened, we had a lot of people that were doing things the old way, and I get it. I'm old and I like to do things. I don't like change, but we had a lot of people that were still filing returns wrong, and that usually ended up in getting an unpleasant letter from the department. So please keep in mind, no more quarterly returns, no more monthly deposits, no more semi-monthly deposits for sales and use tax purposes. One thing on here though, if you did want to make an additional payment, you can do that in GovConnect Iowa. You can log into GovConnect Iowa and you can make a payment. That will allow you to pay, to remit some tax to the department maybe more frequently. However, you will still file as per your filing frequency with the department, again, monthly or annually, unless you happen to be one of those seasonal filers, then you'll only file for certain months out of the year. So again, some things just to keep in mind. A few reminders here. When it comes to Iowa sales tax, sales and use tax, the statute of limitations is 3 years. Why do we say that? Well, the normal statute, when it comes to audits, the department will normally, and I've got my air quotes out here, will normally go back 3 years. This is as far back as we will go. Now, there are other situations that are maybe not so pleasant when we get into fraud and different things like that. We can go back more than 3 years. But for most of us, for most purposes, 3 years is the statute of limitations. This also applies to you. If you, the taxpayer, paid some tax that you didn't have to, you paid some tax in air that you should not have, you can go back up to 3 years and get a claim for refund from the department. You can go back 3 years is what I'm trying to say. So please keep that in mind. 3 years is the normal statute. Tax permits. Any of you that have a sales tax permit, please note that it is not required to be posted for public display. I know I'm dating myself here. I've been with the department for a long time, but when I started as a summer intern, long time ago, one of my jobs as a summer intern was we checked on retail businesses to see if they had their permit hanging up. Now, that has not been a requirement for quite some time, so you do not have to post your Iowa sales tax permit for public display in your place of business. Not required. Iowa does not issue tax exempt numbers. We issue tax permit numbers so that you can collect tax or you can remit tax onto the department, but we do not have a special tax exempt number, okay? This is something that we get questions on in the taxpayer services area on a frequent basis. People will say, hey, how do I get a tax exempt number? And what I'm thinking all the time is, let me know. I'd like to get one of those myself. But in all honesty here, and just joking around aside, the department doesn't give out tax exempt numbers, okay? What is used, a tax permit allows you to collect and remit tax to the department. It is not a license to buy things tax exempt. If you are exempt from tax for some reason, again, resale is a good reason that you may be exempt. You're buying something to resell to your customers, in which case you'll collect tax at that time, unless the customer happens to be tax exempt for some reason. What documentation is used? You will get a sales tax exemption certificate and complete that and provide it to the seller. The seller will keep the exemption certificate in their records in case the department ever audits them. If we audit them and we notice that you did not charge tax to someone, we're going to say, let's see the exemption certificate. Why didn't you charge them tax? And that's when that document would be produced and the department would review it. So again, keep in mind, a sales tax exemption certificate is just a blank form that's available on our website. The purchaser that is claiming exemption is going to fill that out, provide it to the seller, and the seller keeps it in their records. You don't send them to the Department of Revenue. If we happen to be auditing you or something, we'd want to look at them then. But unless the department asks for it, you do not send exemption certificates to the department. A couple things just to remember here. If you've been to webinars before, I'm sure you're aware of our email updates. You can subscribe to these. They don't cost a thing. Go to our website, click on where it says subscribe to updates, and jump in there. The way that I always like to describe this is I subscribe to all of our updates. Myself, I would rather have the information and not need it than need the information and not have it. And I always like to say too, I know where the delete key is on my keyboard. If I get some update that's something that I'm not going to have anything to do with, it doesn't affect my business, does not affect me, I can just delete it. But it's a good way to stay in touch with the department. A lot of times if there's some change that comes up or something that you need to be aware of, this is a good way to stay in touch with the department. So just something to be aware of. It's not I don't think it's a real big deal myself. Subscribe to it. You'll get an email when they come out. If it's not something you like, just delete it. Otherwise, you will at least have the information. There are various topics that you can subscribe to. So depending on what your needs are, what's going to be important to you, you can choose all of these topics, one of these topics, a couple of these topics, whatever works best for you. Just note that there are some difference on here. A couple of things that are pretty popular. The GovConnect Iowa is a big popular thing at this point in time, since it's still fairly new with users. You might want to be on that one. Also, due date reminders. This is a good thing as well to let you know when returns are coming up due. It helps you remind so that you're not going to be late. The Department of Revenue is also on social media. So get out there. We are on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We've got some YouTube videos as well. We are out there on social media. So by all means, if you are into social media, please take advantage of it. It's just another way of staying in contact with the department, so you will have some ideas of what's going on. Okay, if you have some questions here, how do you get a hold of the department? Well, we do have a toll-free number. You can contact us there. The number is on the screen, 800-367-3388. That will allow you to speak to one of the members of our taxpayer services team, and you can ask some questions. You can also email the department as well. The email address is listed there, idr@iowa.gov. And if depending on what the question is or what day it is, I'm one of the folks that answers questions there, so I might be the one that responds to you. I'm primarily involved in email responses. I'm on the phones a little bit, not a lot, but I'm more on the emails instead. So this is a way that you can reach out if you have a question. We'll do what we can for you and provide as much information as we're able to. I did not mention, I'm going to back up one more. I didn't mention our website, and if it wasn't on one of the slides before, but our website is tax.iowa.gov, and that's spelled out iowa.gov, tax.iowa.gov, and that's where you can find a lot of information on our website as well. So with that being said, I've got some, looks like we've got some Q&A that's going in here. I'm going to take a look at some of these and see if we can maybe answer some of them. Let's see here. And Kyle, you can kind of keep an eye too if there's something on here. I know there's a lot of questions in here I can see already. I'll pick and choose a few of them and respond to them. If there's something that you do not get your question answered, by all means, reach out to us. You can send an email to that address. I'll back up one more just so I'll keep that up here so everybody can see it. Email it right to the department and we'll do what we can for you. Because I don't think I'm going to get through all these questions because we got quite a stack of them.
And we'll also take basically all these questions and we'll forward them to you, Terry. So then you'll have everyone's email, contact information. Then they can reach out to you directly, or you'll have these questions yourself. So everybody will be heard eventually. So
okay, that works. Thanks a lot, Kyle.
Yep.
First one here, we had one at the beginning here. For exemption, if we resurface a parking lot, would this be covered? If we're resurfacing a parking lot, what I'm envisioning here is maybe we're doing like some blacktop work or something like that, and generally that is considered like a reconstruction. And usually this would be something that would be considered to be tax exempt in most cases. So the general answer is resurfacing a parking lot, generally speaking, yes, that would qualify for exemption. Let's see here. I'm looking at one here that is, I'm a manufacturing business and I buy a piece of production equipment and subsequently buy replacement parts for the equipment. Would I complete a tax exemption certificate? And these two types of transactions not be subject to sales tax? This one, I will say in general, yes. Iowa does have an exemption for manufacturing equipment. So if you are a qualifying manufacturer, you're buying qualifying manufacturing equipment, you can purchase that tax exempt. And yes, submitting an exemption certificate to the vendor is the proper way to go. The same applies to replacement parts as well. If they are qualifying replacement parts, again, meaning you're a manufacturer, the equipment's exempt, so too are the qualifying replacement parts. An exemption certificate would be the way to go. What I would suggest to you, get to our website, type in manufacturing, and we've got a publication that provides some information for you. That'll provide some more details on the exemption for manufacturers that are out there. Let's see. This one is earlier. This is a pretty basic one here. It looks like Jennifer is asking, so I need to tax my services. Well, Jennifer, and this is for everybody as well that's present here still, check out our publication. Remember, we only tax certain services in Iowa. We don't tax every service under the sun. Okay, there's only certain ones. If that service is listed in the Iowa code as a taxable service, that means you got to charge tax on that service unless some other general exemption applies. So if you remember on my slides toward the beginning, I gave some examples of some taxable services, cosmetology services, lawn care services, electrical repair and installation. Those are just examples of some of the services. So if you need more information on those services, get in our website in the little search box in the upper right-hand corner, just type in taxable services. That publication will pop up and it'll show you what services we do have as taxable.
Terry, would that be found inside of the sales and use tax guide webpage?
I believe, I don't have that one in front of me, Kyle, but I think if you get into the sales and use tax guide, I think it also has a link inside there for taxable services.
Perfect. Okay.
But boy, don't bet the farm on it, but I believe so. I believe it is in there.
Okay.
Will the slide deck be sent to participants? I think that's more one for Kyle.
Yep, everyone, there's a download link inside of the chat box right now. Sophie, maybe you can send that out once again, just in case anybody missed it. You can also download it on our website, iasourcelink.com, on our tax webinars page.
Okay, thanks again. Is the tax on goods consumed a sales tax or a use tax because you assess yourself? I think you will find, this is from David, on the sales tax return, goods consumed is under the sales tax section. And so that would be a sales tax. So it could be subject to local option, assuming that you're in a local option sales tax jurisdiction. And what's the thought process on that? Goods consumed, an example of goods consumed is if you are a retailer and you buy all of your inventory and you do not pay tax on it because you are buying the inventory for resale. Okay, so the inventory you're purchasing to resell to others, you won't pay tax on it. Well, if you do not sell that to your customers, instead, if you take something off the shelf, so to speak, you pull it out of inventory so you can use it, that is an example of a goods consumed, and that is reported under the goods consumed line on the sales and use tax return. It does come on as a sales tax, so it is subject to the local option tax as well if you're in a local option tax area. Good question. Let's see here. Joshua, from what I heard, if we have been billed for sales tax on our energy utility bill, then we should possibly investigate this for a refund since we may be getting overcharged. Okay. First of all, Joshua, this is only for home heating, just basically for you as a resident. Okay, so this applies to your home just for you. Does not apply to a business or anything like that. The sales tax in that situation should only be the local option sales tax. It should not be for the state sales tax. Again, this is for home heating only, for just for your residents, and it's paid by you, the resident. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions on it, email us and we can kind of point you in the right direction for that. Good question. Okay, I'm not sure that one. Some of these are pretty specific, so I'm going to skip over a couple here. I'm an Iowa business, but we ship our products overseas to sell there, like in France. Do we need to collect Iowa sales tax? Okay, in this particular situation that you've described, if you are an Iowa business and you are shipping product outside the state of Iowa, there would be no Iowa sales tax due on that transaction. That's because it is an interstate commerce transaction. So if you're shipping product outside the state of Iowa, doesn't matter if it's to another country or not, there would be no Iowa sales tax due in the situations that you've described. Good questions. I believe this next one, this is from Scott. It has 100K for a year or a lifetime. I'm assuming you're asking about the economic nexus threshold, and it is $100,000 for a year. That's the economic nexus threshold, $100,000 of gross sales in Iowa. Again, gross includes taxable sales, non-taxable sales. All of the sales are going to be included in that. Let's see here. Let's see. Again, a question on use tax. Do we pay the 1% local tax for items classified as use tax? This is for Amy, and the answer to that is no. The local option tax is a local option sales tax. It does not apply to use tax transactions. Does not apply to use tax transactions. Okay, let's see. This one we touched on in the presentation as well. This is from Eric. Do we have to display our sales tax permit at each location? And the answer to that is no. Sales tax permits are not required to be posted for public display, so you don't have to worry about that. Another question, this is from Kelly. If we have a storefront in 2 different counties, do we need more than one permit? Okay, by this one, Kelly, I'm assuming if you have a storefront, that means you're making taxable sales in more than one location. And the answer to that, if you are making taxable sales in more than one location, you are going to need more than one sales tax permit. Okay, so any location in Iowa that makes taxable sales, you're going to need a sales tax permit for that location. Let's see here. Okay, this one I think is a good question that this is from Melinda. Regarding the new construction exemption for services, does this apply to the product being used for the new construction? For example, we add an addition on our existing building, is the drywall, tile, carpet, etc., subject to the 6% use tax? In a nutshell, yes. Building materials are subject to tax even when used in new construction. So even though the labor, the services connected with new construction are exempt from tax, the materials are still taxable unless we get into a designated exempt entity situation, which that's not what we're discussing here. But a normal construction situation, usually the contractor is the one that has to pay tax on materials that they are using or consuming in a construction contract. So Melinda, if you want more information on sales tax for construction and related, check out our publication, go to our website, in the little search box, type in Contractor's Guide, and that'll provide you some information on that. But in general, building materials are still subject to tax by the contractor. They have to pay that tax. It's part of their cost of doing business, and they just include it all in the price to the customer. And when it is a new construction situation, they do not charge the customer any tax for the labor because of that exemption on services, as we discussed earlier, or the materials. So again, check out the Contractor's Guide. That'll provide some guidance for you. Well, let's see here.
Terry, I think we have time for about one more, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up for today.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. Let me just scroll down here a little bit.
A lot of great questions, actually.
There's some very good questions. This one looks like marketplace facilitators. This is from Annette. How does Nexus apply for marketplace facilitators if they're located outside of Iowa but contract with delivery drivers to deliver in Iowa? Does that give them physical Nexus? That I don't, usually a marketplace facilitator, if they are facilitating sales and they're again over $100,000 in a year, that's going to give them the economic nexus. Annette, if you have a specific situation, please email the department and give a little more details on it. But usually marketplace facilitators, these outfits are pretty darn big. And in most cases, I think they meet the $100,000 threshold fairly easily because they're facilitating so many sales within the state of Iowa as well as elsewhere.
Awesome. Well, I'll just wrap everything up, get my little spiel here, and then everybody can get on with their day. So again, thank you, Terry, for sharing the ins and outs of sales and use tax in Iowa. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be emailed out to you in a few days. This really means just like a day or two. So be on the lookout for that. If your questions were not answered today, make sure to download the PDF version of the slides. Your answer may be found there, or just rewatch this webinar for further clarification. Your questions will also be emailed to Terry out or alongside your contact information after this webinar concludes, so he can follow up with you from there. Also, if you have questions, you can email that email that's on the screen right now for further clarification. So the next Iowa Department of Revenue webinar will be on August 9th, and we'll cover Iowa tax law legislative updates that were enacted during the 2023 legislative session. So if either you or someone else would be interested in attending, make sure you visit iowasourcelink.com and navigate to our tax webinars page and get signed up. So until next time, take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Have a good day, all.
Bye.